Penny Scraps writes, remember that crepe paper ribbon from Jenni Bowlin's studio? I think I bought it in 2008 or so. I have it in black, turquoise and red. Well, I trip over it in my ribbon jars all the time. Will I ever use it? Glitter Girl, can you help Penny Scraps come up with some creative crepe paper crafting?
Of course I can. It turns out that I have both the black and the red crepe paper ribbon from Jenni Bowlin in my stash too, and I'm just as guilty because look at their complete full packages. I don't have the turquoise anymore. I must have used that one up. But I have the black and the red, so we'll see what we can do with that. And then with the rest of today's layout, I've picked from a few different collections, so not all one collection today. I've got these doily accents from Webster's Pages and these newsprint patterned thickers. They're chipboard with the newsprint pattern over the top from American Crafts. And then in papers and stickers, I've pulled out one of the pattern papers and the sticker sheet from the Beautiful Moments collection from Carta. Now, Carta is a sister company to Echo Park Paper, so they have similar setup to their design to their collection. So you'll get several pattern paper designs, and then in the collection pack you also get a sticker sheet and an alphabet sheet. But the difference is that the Carta papers are printed on a textured paper rather than the smooth paper. So just to so that you have that little bit of knowledge. So I'm going to use this one that has this kind of quilt pattern and all these different colors to bring everything together. Then I pulled out three papers from Jenni Bowlin. This book print and this red with circles, both from the Wren collection, and this die cut paper in craft. And then for my background today, I'm going to use this bright yellow, well, it's not bright yellow, it's a pastel yellow, but this yellow repeating design, and that's from the new Webster's Pages that just hit the store. It's a collection called Girlland and has all sorts of different feminine patterns. So I'm going to get started with this as the background and arrange my papers a little bit, and then we'll look at a few different things that we can do with that crepe paper ribbon. I've started by cutting 3 patterns into pieces. The yellow is going to stay full for the background, and then I wanted just about a half sheet of the book print, and then dividing that other half between 2 prints, both with a bit of red, both with some circles, but very different patterns. So to put this together, I'm just going to work with the biggest piece first, because that one is easiest to center top and bottom of the page, and then I can just match the margins. And then I can come in and add the 2 smaller pieces by lining them up. Now, I know that I haven't measured this precisely enough that they're going to meet perfectly in the middle. But that's okay, because I have another plan. I want to run a piece through here in the middle and a piece here. So I'm just going to pick this up and move it over slightly so that I match this margin with the one on all the other sides. And you can take more time and get this measured completely precisely, but this is the method that works for me because I'd rather speed through it a bit, since I know that I'm going to be adding more layers on top. So for me, it just doesn't seem to make enough sense to add in more. So I'm then going to come back and add a strip of this across that center gap, and a little something over on the side to fill the smaller gap that's there too. So to cover this gap, I just wanted to use a bit of that die cut receipt paper and just deciding where I want it to line up. I want this to kind of go against the grain of everything else because everything else is here leaving that yellow margin, but this goes to the top and the bottom, and I like the idea of this going right off the edge of the page. So I'm going to put it about there and then cut off any extra. No, I do like it lined up over the top of that better. Okay. And that gives me a starting point. But they're two 4x6 photos, and where I originally had this piece, they ended up really far down on the page and covered up almost all of this. So I've moved it up just a little bit so that these pieces ended up being a little more even, just to give you an idea of how those little things happen. And if you really like to plan it all out in advance, you'll know that before you go, but I tend to just kind of move things around. Either way will work, so just embrace whatever works for you. But now I can get to a point where I can start to work with my crepe paper ribbon. So the first thing I want to do is a really easy border across the bottom. Now I could make it as simple as this. I could just add it and put adhesive down and have that flat border. It has a nice texture to the paper anyway, but I'm going to add a little bit more texture than that. And to do that, I'm going to run a solid line of adhesive in two places. I'm going to run one here along the bottom of the photo, and then I'm going to take double the amount that it needs to cross the page, and I'm going to run adhesive on that as well. With adhesive in both those places, then I can start to add the crepe paper ribbon, but add it with a bit of a folded texture. So I'm just going to keep it from sticking to the photos and make sure it's plenty loose here. And then just come back and fold it, and you can decide if you want it to be a really orderly fold, and then you could follow the pattern and make it make all of the little scallops into half scallops, and it would be really, really orderly. Or you can make it a bit more freeform and just fold it here and there and not worry too much about it being straight or perfectly even. It's just a matter of what look you prefer. Do keep in mind that because you've put the adhesive down, like you can see now, anytime it overlaps that, it is going to want to stick because the crepe paper is really light. It doesn't take much glue to hold it in place at all. So just be patient and watch where the other side of the crepe paper is going, since you have that long strip. Now don't worry too much if you decide to go the kind of chaotic method and this top line gets a bit messy. Don't worry, I'm going to cover that with a border sticker in a minute, and that's going to make it really easy. So I don't really mind if that top edge gets a little bit out of hand. But this way I can get that folded texture, and I just have a little bit of a different look to the crepe paper than adding it flat. And it's not hard at all. It's very, very simple, but it does take a little patience with everything wanting to stick to the page. And again, push this down to get it off that bottom edge of the photo. And then when you get everything how you're happy with it, you can get to the edge of the page and cut off anything that's extra. So now I could leave this like this, or I can do a few more things to it. So I'm going to go over the top edge with a border sticker. So just grab one of these from the sheet, if I can pull it off. And I think this border sticker is ever so slightly shorter. Yeah. So I'm going to leave a gap at one point so that I can come back in with even more on top of that. So I'm going to leave my gap just here, and then I'll put some more embellishment over the top of that, so I'm not worried about the edge being imperfect there where I just tore it. And then I can also go through and add some stitching, either by hand or with the sewing machine. So I think I'm going to leave the stitching for the moment, but I'm probably going to come back here and just run a line of stitching right over the top of that. So that's one thing we could do with the crepe paper ribbon, and you can use quite a lot in overlapping it, so that's one way to kind of make sure that you're using what you've got there. I'm going to look for the places that I want to put my embellishment, my title, and my writing, and then I can use even more of that crepe paper ribbon on completing this page. To give myself a place for the writing, I want to write kind of in this quadrant of the page, but this is not a good pattern paper for putting my handwriting right over the top. It'd be pretty hard to read. So I'm just going to add a layer of a neutral paint. This is the Malted Milk Paint Dabber. And just kind of, I think my title, there's going to be some embellishment here. My title's going to go here, so I want the journaling to be quite close into there. So I'm just going to paint a layer over the top of this text, And you can see it's not a really obvious color. I'm not adding tons of contrasting color. I'm just lightening the text that's there on the pattern paper so that I'll be able to write over the top and you'll still be able to read what I write. So if you have any of these patterns that have lots of text but they're in just the right place where you want to write and that's not helpful, this is something you can keep in mind. White or cream or other neutral colors can go right over the top, and if you keep the strokes thin enough so that you're brushing the paint out and not leaving a huge amount, then you'll still be able to get the idea of the text print behind the paint without it being overwhelming to the rest of the page. I want to use one of the doilies from Webster's pages, and I've just used my circle punch to get a circle of the red and white pattern paper that I'd already used on the layout just to go behind there, and it gives me a little bit of a mat. So a circle or a die, a circle punch or a die, whatever is useful, but you want something solid behind the doily to be able to use this crepe paper for the embellishment. And I've just glued the doily with my normal adhesive. But then I'm going to take that same crepe paper that I used on the border and do the same sort of technique, because I'm going to use glue and I'm going to fold everything around. But in this case, if you go around a circle, it will turn it into a rosette. And then you can add as many layers as you want. So I'm just going to run some adhesive on the back of this. I think I'll just run half and then I can come back and add some more. And I still find it easier to work from the front, even though you can't really see where you're gluing. But give it a try and see what works best for you. It helps if I start in the place where I actually put the glue. Let's try that again. Okay. So you can just fold, and then you have to bend in this case because you need to go around the circle. So it's slightly different than doing the straight line, but really not very different at all. And you can decide how much you want the rosette, how wide you want it to be. So if I had decided I didn't want quite so much of this, it's okay if I'm just showing you so I can fix it, I promise. So if I only want a little bit, I can have just a little bit around the edge. So that's the whole concept with this embellishment. So you need something round in the middle, like a doily, or it could be something else. Then you need a circle of paper, and then use adhesive on the back and fold the crepe paper into the little rosette shape. Nice and easy. And then you can layer as many things on top as you want. You can use a little flare badge. You can do anything. You can make your own little prize badge, of course. Anything you like. Adding the rosette here at first glance makes it look like it's really, really overlapping the photo. But if you look here, what you can't see now that I've covered it up is that there were people's heads in the audience that are in the way at the bottom of this picture. So what I've really done is just covered up the outlines of their heads, and you're not really missing anything from the picture. So if you have an imperfect photo that you could just cover up a little bit and the photo would look a bit better, that's something to keep in mind, that's a good time for the embellishment to come up over the photo. So I've added a few letter stickers and a little bird to match this paper collection, the Carta papers. And then I want to add a little bit something else here to use the red crepe paper ribbon. So with this one, I'm going to use the plain edged, because with these you got one that was scalloped, one that was pinked, and one that has straight edges. So I'm going to try the straight one this time. And I want to make a little flower. Now, if you've made a ribbon rose, it's really the same process. So basically, you want to crinkle up enough that you've got the center of the flower. Then twist and turn around. So you're twisting with one hand and you're rolling this piece around the center. Now, when you start this at the middle, it always looks a bit of a mess, and you think, how could that ever turn into something? Because that just looks like an absolute blob. But with a few more rolls around, then it starts to get the flower shape. one of the tricks is to not roll too tightly. A looser roll will make it look more realistic and less like it's an absolute spiral, because of course a rose isn't really a spiral or just circled around. It's all those different layers. So if you can keep the twisting of this more loose than you might first think, you'll get a slightly more realistic look. And the good bit is that if it doesn't go right, just unroll it, shake it out, press it out, and start again. And I just want a little one to go down here. I don't want the rose to be giant compared to the bird. And so just cut this. And when you get to the end, just tuck it underneath. Now, this whole rolling and then spiraling is a technique you can use with so many different supplies. You can do it with the fabric strips from Studio Calico. You can do it with ribbon, of course, fabric, all sorts of things like that. Even some border stickers that are flexible enough. So when you get to the end, just tuck it underneath. And if it all starts to kind of fall apart on you, you can take just a little circle or something of paper and put it here and put some adhesive on it, and that will keep it all in place. But I think I can go ahead and stick that one straight onto the layout without any trouble. So I'll put the adhesive on here, which is probably a little bit easier than putting it onto the crepe paper rose. And then that has some texture. If you like, you can add a sewing pin through there with a little pearl on the end, or you can add a little clear gem in the middle to look like a little raindrop, anything you like. So, and that sort of motif, this sort of embellishment, you can make time and time again. I still have plenty of the crepe paper ribbon after making one small one. They work well on cards, on layouts, so that's a really versatile thing. If you've got lots of this crepe paper ribbon stored up, might as well use it for something like that where you could get plenty of embellishments. Okay, I want to go ahead and get the title and the writing on the page. So I'm going to grab my thickers. I'm going to put the title here. My writing's going to go there, and then I'm almost done. I think I have one last little bit of crepe paper ribbon, and that's going to come up here. So I'm going to use the top of the photo as my baseline for my lettering. And if you watched last week, then you'll know why I'm doing that. But basically, I always like to have some sort of horizontal line to follow with my lettering, especially because that makes it a lot easier for you to pick out the lettering and read it, especially when you're dealing with lots of patterns on the page, and even the lettering has patterns. So that will help. If it has a line to follow, it makes it a lot easier on the eye. Okay, title in place, writings on the page, and that leaves me just a tiny little bit to finish up. I wanted to bring in this black and red somewhere at the top. So I've added a little bit of paint up here in the corner just to balance out what was there. And then I'm going to take a little bit of both the black and the red crepe paper ribbon and do something that's a lot less structured than these. And I really just want a tiny little bit in kind of haphazard, just a little. So because the black has the scalloped edge, I'm going to run that one at the bottom. And I don't want nearly so many folds as I had before. Just this tiny little bit. And in fact, I think I might pull this back up a little bit. It's alright. Crepe paper will tear if you try and push it around the page, but I'm going to put something over the top of there too, so that's okay. And I think I don't want a huge, the red is too thick for what I want, so I'm just going to cut a small piece and then come back and cut that in half. And run some adhesive on the back of that, and I should be able to just overlap it now. Just really quite messy and and overlapped. And then to finish it all off, I'm going to take my sewing machine and add some stitches right over the middle of this and along that line, and then I'm going to call that done. So here's the finished page. I've added some zigzag stitching and some straight stitching to finish off that little detail, and I did go ahead and put one of those lovely little embellished rhinestone pins from Jenni Bowlin through that flower. And that's pretty much it. So there are a few different ideas, 4 different ideas. The ruffled border along here, going around a circle or another shape to create a rosette edge, which you could do to a heart, a flower, all sorts of different shapes like that. Twisting and spiraling into a little paper flower, or overlapping and just kind of haphazardly putting it all together to create a little final touch in a smaller area of the page. Now, hopefully, with a little bit of luck, you can take any of those ideas and adapt them to your own style. So if you wanted to put this over a double page, you could create this border twice and it would go all the way across the 2-page spread. If you like things really, really orderly, you can fold everything really precise. If you like it a bit more haphazard, you could add more layers of kind of crazy layering, and you can adapt it to your colors, your style of papers, and everything else. So I hope that gives you a little challenge. Now, if you don't have this crepe paper ribbon in your stash, don't freak out. You can still participate in this week's challenge by taking any older supply that you feel you have and you really should have used by now, but you haven't, and try and mix and match with your current supplies to give yourself a little pat on the back for using something that you've held on to for a while. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on another adventure soon.
Join us next week for the continuing adventures of Glitter Girl and the ongoing mystery of the scrapbooker behind the mask at 2peasinabucket.com.